and I am a development studies second year student of MA. So I wanted to mention that Amartya Sen, Nobel laureate, also mentioned that to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as the father of economics and his great inspiration for economics. And secondly, Dr. Ambedkar also wants to Maharashtra government at that time in 1956 and in 1960 for Vidarbha state. So please give some your suggestion on that.
Thank you. Other questions? I'll listen to all questions and then answer in one slow.
Javin sir, my name is Nilesh Gaikwad. I am LLM student in TSI. My question is basic. These days now CSR मतलब ऐसा company responsibility, social responsibility, and how we can look this CSR to these days, because the CSR now impose world WTO impose the CSR condition, and it is not binding conditions on the companies, on the corporate. These are the volunteers, and they have some suggestion like a CSR company corporate divided into territories within the country, and they give the volunteer that's a welfare facilities to the common. But sir, there is another drawbacks of this, that they create some division of labors among the society. So how we can see this?
Good evening, sir. Myself Shuman Chatterjee. I am from Dalit Tribal Studies. Shuman Chatterjee. Sir, regarding what you said that Ambedkar resigned from the ministerial post 1952, in the resignation letter he also mentioned that he is resigning because he has not been consulted on economics affairs, though he was an economist passed from London School of Economics. And my question is, sir, Ambedkar exhorted Dalit to come to urban areas because in the villages they face the oppression. But the kind of urbanization that has been followed in India, they are further, there has not been any lift up in the social status. They are further suppressed by the capital structure in the urban area. So how much do you think that Ambedkar's argument for the Dalits to come to urban areas hold the ground in the present context of urbanization?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir. My name is Khurshid. And sir, my question is that when, like you said that Ambedkar in economics made several provisions for marginalized group. So what was his stand when he made provision for reservation for Dalit? So what was his stand on the minority Dalit community, for especially in context of Muslims and Christians?
Yes, sir. In front of here, sir. Center. Yeah.
My name is T. Gomilal. From Dalit Tribal Studies, second year. My question is very simple. I'm curious.
What's your name again?
T. Gomilal. You can just call me Lal. Yeah. I'm a bit curious why Dr. Ambedkar turned his, if I would call ideology from a left inclined before he was a bit left inclined nationalization of bank and such a nationalization of industries, and now in the later part of it, he turned to a socialist democrat. Why do you think that he turned it? And also, can you give some insightful economic principles that he have underlined for the downtrodden, especially for the Dalits, being the most landless category in our society? And if I'm not mistaken, he have not touched the issue of lands when it comes to the economy of the poor, but he encouraged the rural landless people to migrate into the town to emancipate from the caste system, where he did not touch the integral part of the economy, that is land, when it's come to the tribal, the lower section of the community. Yeah, thank you.
So the right side. Sir, I am Akshay. My question is, Dr. Ambedkar has been the more analytically rigorous and logical person I have ever read until now. In the all through his life, each step he said, say from left-leaning person to social democrat. Then it was like he had an academic argument backed up by his actions. So what was academic? So when he embraced Buddhism, my question is, after he embraced Buddhism, what is the today's importance of, say, in there's a lot of debate going on climate change, and there are several books written by Buddhists in USA about Buddhism and climate change and all this stuff. So what is the present research areas which we have to look forward? Can you connect these stuff?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. I am Abhijit Bansore from MA in Social Work in Dalit and Tribal Studies. So my question is regarding the idea of state socialism. Ambedkar vehemently tried to propagate the idea of state socialism along with various factors which you also mentioned in your speech. From maybe past 10 to 15 years, the role of the state in the welfare activities has been diminishing, as contrary to what Ambedkar was trying to propose. As far as what I've read up from his writing, he constantly felt that state was an essential entity for the development of the marginalized communities in India. However, post 1990, the private sector has been entering into the daily works of the common man. This has definitely led to the certain setback into the life of the marginalized communities. So how do you think there could be any revival of his principles of state socialism given the current government, who is least interested in proposing the idea of state socialism? So if you could please throw some light on this, it would be insightful. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. My question is related to the branding of this. Yeah, at this side. Yeah. My question is related. I won't say name. Name is attached with religion, so sorry. So. My question is related to the branding of B.R. Ambedkar as a leader of Dalits. Now, what I would like to say that it was just a coincidence that such a great man was born to a community that was completely suppressed at that time. And had he born in any other community, I'm sure he would have done work for the suppressed community. And why he is branded as a leader of Dalits, I would say his legacy that was taken forward by his follower was basically more or less focused towards their own community. Had he been alive up till now, I would surely say that he would have been more focused towards the community that is more suppressed. Now I'm talking about the religious minority in this country. So had he been living in this time, he would have, I think, shifted his focus, or more or less had been focused toward that community also. So what would be your view on it?
Yes. Young lady here.
Good evening, sir. My name is Madhuri Khalko. I'm assistant professor in the School of Law. Thank you for the brilliant insight on what Dr. Ambedkar has done as an economist. I'm a lawyer, and for me it was really enlightening that I've always known Dr. Ambedkar as the father of our constitution. So to see him, to actually know that an economist actually drafted the constitution and drafted it so well, it's a big thing for us. My question is, you were speaking about Dr. Ambedkar being the champion for the cause of gender equality. Now, in that light, I would like to ask is, I haven't read much about Dr. Ambedkar. I would like to know what he's done for the emancipation of Dalit women. Because Dalit women, they are doubly disadvantaged. If you're talking about gender equality amongst females, there are different structures, there are different hierarchies, and upper caste women, the barriers that upper caste women face are not the barriers that the Dalit women face. Dalit women are in a more disadvantageous position. So what has Dr. Ambedkar done or have spoken about the Dalit women cause? Thank you.
Hello. Sir, here. Hello, sir.
Yeah, sir, I see Dr. Ambedkar. One of the reasons for his empowerment was obviously his knowledge in economics, and also he was a genius, which actually earned him a place in some of the most intellectuals in the country. So my question is, can the area of knowledge of economics and the English language can be used as tools of social empowerment, and which could be the prime focus in the education of marginalized communities? So, this actually destroys the structures of caste, whereas every person is empowered and can debate and can earn his way to the top. So we are a country of engineers, but can we also focus on producing more economists and linguists? So that's my question.
So one question over here.
Hello. Hello, sir, here. Hello. Hello, sir, here. I am Suryakant Phadke. I am this alumni. Sir, as you said about the situation of Ambedkar, which he defeated from Maharashtra 2 times. My question is about that. Ambedkar said the politics is the key development in terms of socially, politically and everything. And now in a contemporary scenario of Maharashtra, you will see the Dalit politics are vanished in terms of their coaliting with BJP and where we stand for. And my second question is about the synchronization of BJP in related to the Ghar Wapsi concept. Can you please explain about this?
So one question over here.
So thanks for your speech and all that. We have come to know that Dr. Ambedkar was the Labour Minister for this nation. After the policies of globalization and liberalization, our country is facing huge unemployment is another way. Large section of the country is still unemployed because of his inefficiency towards skills and all that. My question is, what would have been his take in today's contemporary politics over the issues of reservation in private sector? Thank you.
Sir,
I guess waiting for the last time. Normally bureaucrats get the first chance, but he is a student, so I am getting the last chance. I am an IRS officer working in the Government of India, currently Additional Director in DG Service Tax. Sir, I used to say I am a student among bureaucrats and a bureaucrat among students. Particularly, I was very much keenly studying many of your articles in the field of economics. I am also being trained in Tokyo University in economics field. Many of the ideas of Doctor I have presented there and quoted you extensively. This is the first time I have a face-to-face meeting. I am very glad to meet you, sir. You have highlighted many of the vital points of Doctor's contributions. Thank you. So in this context, since we are economists, you have been telling the kind of upper cap that Dr. Ambedkar wanted to put on the credit lending facility of the RBI. That is money creating capacity of the RBI. So like giving on the basis of the ad hoc treasury bills, the government, the central bank is keeping on giving money to the government. So this is a kind of deficit financing. And the theoretical persuasion of Dr. Ambedkar, if he says that there should be a cap on M, the quantity of money, can we say that as a theoretician, he will fall under the quantity theory of money theorists? Is it that his theoretical, locating him in a theoretical form? And in the current situation where social spending is so much cut down, fiscal deficit is being, twin deficit, fiscal deficit is being characterized as a monster. And people extend, many of Chicago Persuasion School of Economics say that fiscal deficit per se is inflationary. Whereas Keynesians say no, it is per se not inflationary, it is inherently not inflationary. And how we look at Dr. Ambedkar's views in this context, whether he will be going for, he would be an authority of deficit financing that is oriented towards protective investment of the capital, monetizing of the capital. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for very, very good questions. Actually, these questions are so interesting and so important that on each one of them I'll have to give a separate lecture, which is not possible. But I'm going to try to give you a quick response to some of these questions. In all, I got about 13, including the bureaucrats question. So I have 13 questions. You know, with the social media, there was the first question about Amartya Sen calling BRA as father of economics. In social media, a lot of these laudatory messages go on circulating. Believe me, they are not all valid. I have not read Amartya Sen having ever said that Ambedkar was father of economics. So, you know, I would have been very happy had he said that. That's not the point. But the fact is, don't distort the history. In fact, in social media, you know, I understand the emotions and the feelings behind it. But, you know, don't take it so far to twist the facts and believe in that make-believe world. Please don't do that. Amartya Sen, for it, you know, he's a great economist. I have great regard for him. I come from his tribe. But have you ever seen Amartya Sen ever talking about caste? Please find out. Amartya Sen has never talked about caste. And Ambedkar was saying that the caste is a very, very important factor, and because of the caste system, India's economic growth has been receded and impeded, and that is one of the biggest blame that he puts on the caste system. Amartya Sen, with all the great respect for him, he has never ever addressed any issue of the caste, to the best of my knowledge. If you have seen that anywhere, please bring it to my notice, but to the best of my knowledge, he never has. And I hold it against him, and there is no question, he would have never said that Ambedkar was father of economics. So it is somebody's dream, and that dream is unfortunately not true. The second question that I had was, it was more of a comment on CSR. Again, there is a lot of misconception that these are the things which are imposed by the corporate social responsibility, something that is imposed by WTO. Absolute nonsense. You know, a lot of things are fed to us which have nothing to do with the reality. WTO doesn't impose these kind of restrictions. They, of course, as a part of the system, they recommend collectively all kinds of rules and regulations, but CSR is not one of them. And if it is there, you should welcome it. Because what does it say? That for certain kind of corporate entities, 2% of their profits must be used for social purpose. Now, what would be wrong? If it is imposed by WTO, WTO is not in the business of doing that. I would love to impose 3% in fact, because we are talking about telling corporate sector that don't go for your profits alone, you have a wider social responsibility. So what's wrong if that is done? So that I think we have to understand. There is a third question, this was by Suman Chatterjee, I think, you know, Ambedkar resigned in 1952, as you said. He resigned in 1951. But you commented that Dr. Ambedkar, this was a very interesting question by the way, that he said Ambedkar told people to go to urban areas and does what he was saying to people hold any ground today? This was a very good question. I like that very much. Please understand this. At the same time, when Gandhiji was telling people, go to villages, Ambedkar was saying, go to the towns. Please understand, what was the logic? See, Gandhiji had this vision of Ram Rajya based on self-contained villages, going back to the ancient past. That is one way of looking at it. Ambedkar was looking at it from completely different point of view. And Ambedkar's argument was very simple. He called villages cesspools. And therefore, he recommended that if people remain in the villages, they would be known by their caste and they would be treated by that caste no matter what is their potential. Whereas, if they go to urban areas, particularly the cities, then they can live under anonymity of these cities and therefore they will be able to show their own potential and they will get opportunities. So, both of them, Gandhiji and Ambedkar, both of them were right in their own way. I think looking at, what Ambedkar was saying that time is certainly even valid today, but in a different way. Then there was a question, fourth question was by Sushil on what was the position that he took about minority reservation. Dr. Ambedkar always thought, and if you look at his speeches, he always talked about, he said, we are so proud of our civilization, and the great traditions. But look at us. We have kept people, what we call scheduled caste today, downtrodden for so long. Then he talked about criminal tribes. He said, how does it justify? These are the blots on our civilization. How can we be proud of such civilization? So he talked about that. About minority reservation, I don't think he talked about, there is no provision in the constitution for minority reservation. However, in 1948, Dr. Ambedkar wrote a very important book called Thoughts on Pakistan. That book, he made out the case for partition and case against partition. And including Mahatma Gandhi and Barrister Jinnah, they both agreed that on that subject, when all the debates were going on before partition, no, it came not in 1948. The first edition came in 1940. Sorry, I missed a year. By 47, the partition did take place. So in 1940, he wrote a book called Thoughts on Pakistan, which became the very big book, 450-page book. In that, he made out he makes both arguments in favor of partition and against partition, and he gives a very logical explanation, and that became actually the negotiations of the partition. Both Jinnah and Gandhiji both appreciated this as a most useful source of information. But I don't recall Dr. Ambedkar taking any position on the minority reservation. Somehow constitutionally, while later amendments have provided for that in some states, it has not happened at the time of constitution, as far as I know. But you might want to consult some constitutional expert on that. I'm not the constitutional expert. Then there was this question by, I think, Kumil about turning social democrat. And then there was a connected question by Abhijit Bansode about the state socialism. Two things you have to understand. First of all, a lot of people argue that state socialism that Dr. Ambedkar recommended in 1947 was his final thought. Absolutely wrong. A lot of people still dream about going back. Now this is a question that is very, very close to my heart, because I think it would be the most stupid thing to even think about going back to state socialism. Our country had a major crisis in 1991. Our foreign exchange reserve had dwindled to a level of less than $1 billion. We were on the brink of a disaster. We had to keep our gold with the foreigners to be able to get some money to survive for day-to-day money. Then we changed the policy. And after that, the results have been extremely positive, not negative. So, state socialism, that was the order of the day. Even when Dr. Ambedkar in 1947 talked about state socialism, he did not talk about nationalizing everything. Remember, that was the time when the dominant thought in the worldwide was the planning experiment of Soviet Union, and Soviet Union had made a lot of progress, and that was the shining example, and that was the dominant thinking. But still, Dr. Ambedkar did not go for, in fact, he was a big critic of Marxist theology. Very strong critic, and he was against nationalizing of everything. He wanted to combine certain amount of nationalization without encroaching on the role of the private sector. And these are the words of Dr. Ambedkar himself. That even when he recommended state socialism, he did not talk about the extreme case of nationalization of everything. He talked about a good combination, the mixed economy. That was the model actually we accepted after 1947, when we started the planning in 1950, the first plan. So mixed economy model, Dr. Ambedkar was very keen on that. He himself changed his style, although he in 1947, in the states and minorities, he took that position. He gave up that position afterwards, and he became a social democrat. In the sense, if you see the election manifesto that he wrote in 1952, it clearly says that I am not taking any extreme position, and I would like to focus no ism is close, including state socialism. He says no ism, I don't subscribe to any ism, and I want to make sure that there is an overall growth and development rather than going in for socialism or any particular ism. So in the later part, he himself gave up the state socialism. So a lot of people think that that was his final position. In my opinion, that is not correct. And there is no question of dreaming to go back to that, because that system proved to be a terrible thing, and it landed our country into a crisis in 1991, and we came out of it. A lot of people talk against LPG. There was a question that there was unemployment is so much reduced. Just look at what has happened. Yes, what you say is correct, but you look at the kind of achievement that we have made after the liberalization, part privatization, globalization that has taken place. This requires a bigger lecture. I don't want to go into that. What I am saying is that do not worry about any particular ism. Those things are gone and dead. What is the only ism which requires to be that we need to look at is professionalism. And we need to focus on an eclectic combination of every thought, but a combination which will lead to growth and development. That should be your attitude, rather than taking any doctrinaire position. That's my feeling. Then there was this question. There was this question about Dr. Ambedkar. Akshay was the one who asked this question about embracing Buddhism and what is today's importance of that. I think this was very important. It was in terms of giving them identity. It's very important that a lot of people ask, what is the advantage? What have we gained? What have we gained after the conversion? Please note that somebody linked it with the Ghar Wapasi and all that. Please, for God's sake, do not compare these kind of sporadic small efforts with Dr. Ambedkar's massive effort. In the history of the world, and of course our country, conversions have taken place, but conversions have invariably taken place either under the sword or under some kind of incentive given in terms of money. Ambedkar's conversion, where 500,000 families converted at one go, is the only conversion in the history of mankind where, without any pressure, without any incentive, just because of the faith that everybody had in Dr. Ambedkar, the person, that so many people converted themselves. So that is not comparable with this. Even this Ghar Wapasi that you are talking about, haven't you read on TV or seen on TV the kind of promises which were made to them, including getting them Aadhaar card, and even for these sundry conversions, there have been incentives given. The only incentive that Dr. Ambedkar gave was the right to live as a human being. That was something. So one cannot compare that kind of thing with the conversions of Karvapasi that is taking place today. It gave them the identity. Just to give you a small example, some more questions are coming, and it's not going to be possible to answer all of them because I'm going to stay all night here, and you will also have to stay. So, you know, on the contribution of conversion, I want to say something very important. Do you know that before 14th October 1956, if you see Dalits in Maharashtra, I can talk about Dalits in Maharashtra, what were typically the names of people who were born? You know, Dagdu, Dondu, Katsuru. These were typically the names. Even in that movie Lagan, what is the name of that fellow? Kachra. Why were those people had those names? Because when a child is born, they would go to the village Purohit, the priest, and ask him. Then he would say that, you know, in order not to have evil eye cast on the child, you better call it Kuda, Kachra, you know, Dagdu, Dhondu. I want to challenge those who say, what is the contribution? After 1956, 14 October 1956, can you show me one Dagdu is born? One Dhondu born? You will find Siddharths are born, Gautams are born, Dagdu and Dhondu taking birth in dawn. That is the contribution. That is the contribution that conversion has made. That's my personal opinion. And then there was this question about, a very good question by Madhuri about emancipation of Dalit women. Of course, he played a very important role in emancipation of all women, but Dalit women was a very specific question that you raised. You know, if you see the history of gender equality or political movement in our country, when was the first time women of the recent past, I'm not talking about Gargi and those times, I'm talking about in the last 3-4 decades, 5 decades, when were women coming forward to participate in the political movements? It was Ambedkar's movement. Do you know that? And you should see the speeches that Dr. Ambedkar made to Dalit women. It is amazing. There are only 3 speeches that he made exclusively for Dalit women. He, in fact, even taught, there were 2 or 3 things that he used to tell them. The first thing that he said that when a Brahmin woman is pregnant, she thinks about her child becoming a collector or a doctor or engineer. And when a Dalit woman is pregnant, she thinks of her son becoming a Pattewan. This has to change. This has to change. And he made them dream big, think big. He, in fact, you know, this is truly amazing. Do you know that he, in one of his speeches, he even told Dalit women what kind of ornament they should wear, what kind of clothes they should wear, and what style the saris to be worn. Because he said that if you do it the way you do, you are identifying yourself with a particular community. Don't do that. And he explained, and he, in one speech, this was in the Mahat Satyagraha, 1927, when he gave that speech, he said, tomorrow, when you come for our rally, I want the women here to come wearing a sari in that particular manner. And he showed how to win. And it was done by the women. And the women participation was very, very big. Ambedkar, I think, had a very special focus on Dalit women. And he also felt that focusing on Dalit women is a sure way of changing the status of their family, and particularly the children and upbringing. So Dr. Ambedkar, this was an area which was also very close to his heart. Then there was the 10th question was, again, a very interesting question. This was a question about whether economics and English as a combination can be used for empowering the marginalized? I think this is a very, very good question. The answer is yes, and I have to say this, that there is a group in Delhi. This I don't know whether you have heard about. There's a group in Delhi, Chandrabhan Prasad. Do you know that every year they celebrate a festival of English goddess? They consider English as a goddess for Dalits because that is going to hold the key to change everything. And 2-3 years back, first time when he did that, he has a statue of English goddess, and I was the chief guest there. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting. All the ambassadors of all countries were present. Big ambassadors were present, and even Digvijay Singh was also present. And another thing that they are doing, is about education. It's very fashionable in our country to criticize Macaulay, right? Because they all say that Macaulay, this guy, he wanted to create the clerks for the British Empire, and that is why he gave education to everybody, and he was making clerks, which is true. His incentives were, his own inclinations were suspect. But people forget one very important thing Macaulay did, for which all Dalits should be very grateful. That he took the education out from the temples, and the moment it was taken outside the temple, the possibility of non-Brahmins having education vastly improved. Do you realize that we have got that? British were the ones who made it compulsory for every serviceman to go to English school. That is how Baba Saheb Ambedkar's father, who was a Subedar in the army, was forced to, like everybody else, the children had to go to school. And this was the beginning of the, allowing people, not keeping education confined to a small strata, but making it a weapon for the so-called Bahujan Samaj. So I think this is a very powerful combination of economics and English, which can go a big way in empowering the marginalized. Then there was a question about Garvapasi that I have already responded. LPG and huge unemployment, yes, I've already talked about that, because on that subject I will have to talk a lot and I don't want to do that. But on the whole, I think LPG has been a great help. In 1991, we were in such big bad trouble that the name of our country was going to be wiped out from the economic map of the world. We were like a patient who is artificially kept alive on oxygen. We were that bad, and the world had forgotten, and nobody was turning to us. That is why we had to place our gold with the Bank of England. How did the situation change? It changed because of liberalization, part privatization, and globalization, mind you. We had never grown at a rate more than 3.5%. If you look at our long-term growth, 1951 to 1986, our average growth rate was only 3.5%. They used to call it Hindu rate of growth because it was as if it was written on the forehead of all our country, that we can't grow more than 3.5%. After 1991, see what has happened. One thing great about our country, when things are going normal, we fight with each other. But when there is a crisis, then the whole country becomes one. And when we address that problem as one people, that is when we convert crisis into an opportunity. That is what happened in 1991. After we did that, just look at our growth rate. 1992 to 2002, first 10 years of reform, our growth rate averaged 6%. 2002 to 2005, our growth rate averaged 8%. 2005 to 2008, it averaged 9%, and we became the second fastest growing country in the world. And that happened because of liberalization, part privatization, and globalization. I remember those debates in the 1990s, when they started opening up, and I used to defend LPG and a lot of criticism I used to receive. One of the common argument that was made at that time was that, look, why are we opening up? The feeling was that the moment we open up, all the rest of the world is going to pounce on us and grab it. And so I used to ask a very simple question, which is really a common sense. India has 3.5% of world's land. We have 16% of world's population, and undoubtedly one of the most intelligent people in the world. So 3.5% of land, 16% of population, and with all that, what is our share in the world trade? At that time, it was 0.5%. 0.5%. A lot of people think that there is some kind of conspiracy that all these countries and WTO, they are all coming together to corner India. Absolute rubbish. Because it's a common sense question. If our share in the global trade is 0.5%, just ask yourself, why should the countries which have a share of 99.5% come together to corner a country which has 0.5%? This is common sense. But we all know common sense is very uncommon. That is why we get carried away by that. Conspiracy theory. There is no such thing. We have enormous potential, and this enormous potential has to be harnessed. And the way to harness it, to get out of all those things which have been impediments in our mind, and with the great productivity and capacity of the Indian people unleashed, I think we can forge ahead and become the superpower. Only if we come out of all these, these notions which are holding us back. And the future really belongs to us, and the foundation of which was laid by Dr. Ambedkar himself. One final question, and I'll respond to that, and then I'll stop. I think I've covered it all. Okay. This is called bureaucrat question. I have to take that question. That question, actually, it's an interesting question, but you see, let us not believe that whatever Dr. Ambedkar said is going to be valid for all times to come. This does not apply to anybody, not only Ambedkar, to everybody. Because great people like Dr. Ambedkar, and Amartya Sen, and many others, they all are products of their time. So they analyze the situation using the tools available at that time, use their genius, apply their mind, and give solutions or prescribe solutions. Some of them are timeless, but some of them are completely timed. Now quantity theory of money came much later. What Dr. Ambedkar was saying, he does not talk about quantity theory of money, but he does talk about purchasing power parity. This is very interesting. He talks about, because it was already there, purchasing power parity. Dr. Ambedkar, about deficit financing, I think Dr. Ambedkar's position would have been, he would have defended deficit financing, provided that deficit financing is for the purpose of capital expenditure, capital investment, and if it were for financing the revenue deficit, I think Dr. Ambedkar would have very strongly condemned it. That's my reasonably intelligent guess about what he would have said to the later day development. But I don't remember to have seen anything that he said about the quantity theory of money per se. But about deficit financing, surely, and you are right that fiscal deficit is seen as a monster, and Chicago School considered that equivalent of inflation. You are absolutely right there. Even today, that debate is going on. Yesterday, for your information, the Honorable Prime Minister, after the first meeting of Niti Aayog, he met a number of economists and what did the economists tell him? See, right now, the finance minister is feeling compelled that we have to bring our fiscal deficit down. The target for this year, this financial year, is 4.1% of GDP. That has to be kept and brought down further in the next year's budget, which will be presented on February 28. Why is the finance minister and a lot of people saying that it should be contained further? Because we are worried that if we fail to bring down the fiscal deficit, it would give a wrong signal to the international investor, and credit rating agencies will downgrade India's credit rating, and if India's credit rating is downgraded, that will have adverse implications for India's recovery from the depressed levels of economic growth that we have today. This is one point of view. But the other point of view which is now emerging is this, that let's not bother too much about these credit rating agencies, because these credit agencies anyway, they could never predict the crisis of 2008, nor they could predict the crisis of 1997, they could not predict the crisis of 2011, European crisis. So let's not worry too much about them. In the given situation, let us not worry too much about bringing the deficit down. Let us expand the expenditure, because there is a crying need. See, our revenue is limited, our expenditure and budget deficit has to be brought down. The only way you can, with the lower revenue collection, the only way you can bring deficit down is curtailing expenditure. When you are talking about curtailing expenditure, the axe is going to fall on social expenditure like education and health, and other capital expenditure. That is not desirable, so we don't know what the finance minister will finally do. But I think Dr. Ambedkar's thinking would have been precisely that there is no harm in having higher deficit, provided that that money is well spent. If it is spent on unproductive things or for meeting revenue expenditure, that is something which he would have condemned. I think I have tried to respond to all questions. There were some questions which have been brought here, but I think I'll leave something. I'm going to leave some questions in your mind. The reason is very simple. Unless you have some questions in your own mind, you will not try to find the answers. So I don't want to give you all the answers. Think more, find the answers for yourself. If I can help, I will be delighted to help. Thank you. Thank you very much.